Today we're diving straight into a look at the Razer DeathAdder V3 and V3 Pro. In the video we'll discuss the new shape, the changes compared to the V2, the differences between the wired and wireless models, the additional features available through Synapse, and then perform some of our standard in-game tests with our final thoughts at the end. So with the exception of weight and cable, both mice are essentially identical, with each coming in at a length of 128mm, height of 44, and width at the grip position of roughly 59 to 61 depending on your hand size. Weight balance is good on both, and there's no sign of any creaking or rattling on either model, nor accidental side button actuations when squeezing, which is great. I'd say the V3 is best suited to those with medium to large hands, and those familiar with my content will know that I certainly appreciate the gradual slope toward its highest point at the back, as that helps to provide a little space between the mouse and my palm, allowing for increased maneuverability when it comes to micro adjustments. In terms of grip, with my 19 by 5cm hands, I can comfortably palm or claw the mouse, and overall I'd say it's quite a safe shape as far as ergo mice go, for better or for worse, which we'll touch on shortly. Now a first for a DeathAdder is that we finally see primary buttons that have been separated from its top shell. Each one features a subtle comfort groove, and inside you'll find third generation optical switches that are now closer than ever to mechanical in feel. No debounce tech is required here either, meaning no need to concern yourself with deterioration or a dreaded double-click issue over time, and mouse 1 and 2 are both snappy in actuation, not too light nor too heavy, and have just enough post-travel to aid in rapid fire. As always, I appreciate the ability to roll my thumb to actuate both of the side buttons, and that mouse wheel, as has always been the case with the DeathAdder series, is yet again best in its class with soft notches and an easy to push in wheel. Underneath the mouse, you'll find Razer's latest iteration of the Focus Pro sensor, which now supports up to 30,000 dpi in increments of 50, to which I'd recommend anywhere from 1600 to 3200 to better help saturate those higher polling rates that are supported. There's a profile or DPI switch here too, and all steps have no smoothing, i.e. you're guaranteed low latency at all times, which is only further amplified by its ability to push beyond 1000 Hz. Now you can go up to 8K on the wired model, and then up to 4K on the wireless should you purchase the hyperpolling dongle that's sold separately, which must then be used at all times to go beyond 1K. My only real disappointment here is Razer's decision to omit a Bluetooth connectivity option from the wireless model, and whilst you'd never want to game over it, having that option is nice for those with work laptops or smart TVs that often feature a limited number of USB ports. Diving into a shape comparison with the V2, I thought it best to freestyle this section rather than attempt to simply condense my thoughts down into a few one-liners that are supplemented with video. I've also brought over the Xlite, which for all intents and purposes is an EC2 clone, and was arguably the most commonly found mouse on the CSGO circuit for the longest of times, and also a personal favourite of mine too. Now, I've already mentioned what I look for in ergo mice like this V3, so subtle comfort grooves that allow for more of a pincer style grip despite their non-symmetrical design, the roll to actuate side buttons, and that gradual slope toward its highest point at the back, allowing for more fingertip style micro adjustment. However, I should also mention how grip width is still incredibly important too, as I don't want a mouse that's too narrow, nor one that tapers in aggressively toward the bottom on the sides like on egg-shaped alternatives. This is because I tend to squeeze my mouse when tracking enemies, and too much of either one can cause an uncomfortable cramping effect. Now with the V2 compared to the original, Razer simply took the shape and straightened up the right side to remove a flare out toward the front, which was a widespread complaint that many users had. I'd say in doing this, they effectively created the definitive edition of a DeathAdder that really can't be improved upon. So whilst for the most part, Razer have taken all of these elements on board in the development of the V3, I can't also help but feel they've had to create something different entirely in their efforts to scale it down in a comfortable way that's safer for those that would otherwise prefer to use the EC2 or Xlite. And that's ultimately resulted in a mouse that might have been better positioned to something different entirely in name, or better yet, simply a Mamba. Funnily enough, I'd say both the V3 and Xlite, if you consider them in shape only, are probably freely interchangeable, so one person that's adept in aiming with one could quite easily swap over to the other. Now, whilst both the left and right sides of the V3 have been further straightened up compared to the V2, its biggest change is arguably in the position of the hump, where it's been moved from more of a central location over to the left. If I catch the light just right, then you'll see how this button kind of moves upward like this. What I found when swapping over from the V2 to the V3 was that for the first few hours, I'd accidentally click on mouse 1 when flicking aggressively to the left, as it's noticeably taller at this point. So really, I think this is probably the one aspect that many previous DeathAdder users might initially struggle with and will have to power through in order to adapt. I think the best way I could describe the differences between these two mice would be to sum up the V2 as an extension of one's hand, where it feels naturally to simply rest your hand on it, whilst the V3, despite being smaller and more maneuverable, does feel more like you're holding on to something. Does that make sense? I don't know, but it kinda does to me. In all, it's certainly a safer shape, and I think Razer have done a good job. Really, the only people that might question any of these improvements, and that's improvements in quotation marks, are previous DeathAdder owners like myself. I'd like to see the original shape return in future, as if combined with newer tech and a similar weight reduction, I'd certainly be tempted myself. But for now, there are too many reasons to upgrade to the V3, and I'm glad I powered through it myself. So once you receive one of the mice, I'd recommend downloading and installing Razer Synapse 3.0. Now you want to do this to gain access to additional features like Razer Hypershift, change any of the onboard DPI steps out of the box, or gain access to above 1000 Hz polling rate on both the wired and the wireless with the hyperpolling dongle. Now with the dongle, if you tap in this, you can change what the RGB indicator does. I've got it set to battery status, which is incredibly useful because it will show a specific color based on the percentage. And this is great because I would recommend going into the V3 Pro and under power and turning off low power mode at below 1000 Hz, because that effectively means your mouse will never be reduced in performance, it will simply die. So being able to quickly see roughly what your battery percentage is and charge if needed can be incredibly useful in that regard. But under customize, we can see we can rebind what every button on the mouse does, including full macro functionality. You also have the ability to utilize Razer Hypershift. So if you have a Razer keyboard as well and you set a Hypershift button, that basically enables a second function for every button. So if I tap on this, we can see we can now rebind left click and we could have it set to anything else, a specific key. Again, great for MMOs. Under performance, we have our DPI steps up to 5 with the ability to set 1 as well. The button on the bottom of the mouse is either profile or DPI, and we'll swap between them. And we also have complete X and Y control, which again can be great for games like CS and COD, where we're aiming at head height and doing jump shots. Unreal Tournament Engine, for example, UE, has a slower vertical than horizontal out of the box for many games, and this can really achieve the same effect no matter what game you play. So not something I use, but something you might want to experiment with. We also have polling rate up here. Again, 2000 and 4000 are available because we have the hyper polling dongle right now on the wireless one. Otherwise, it'll be 125, 500, and 1000. 2000 for me works for pretty much every game. If I go to 4000 in unsupported games, my frame rate will dip, I'll get some stutters, so it really depends on the game and your system. But in supported games, you can go all the way up to 8K where supported without stutters. It's just games that don't. And to be honest, even in the games that do support it, 4000 Hz and battery life is significantly reduced. I end up having to charge every 1.5 days, so I recommend just leaving it at 2000, which is slightly faster than 1K and is not as annoying to charge all the time. Then we have calibration, lift-off distance. I use 4 to 3, which is a little bit lower than the low steps. So with asymmetrical shut-off, you can basically adjust the lift-off distance and the landing distance. So how far you need to lift the mouse before it stops tracking and how close you need to get back to the surface before it starts tracking. And 4 to 3 is pretty comfortable for me. It's not too low that it's annoying, and it's not too high that I get any DPI shift, which is great. And then in terms of the wired one, the only difference, we have all the same functionality. Only difference is under the performance tab, we have 4000 and 8000 without any additional purchase, straight out of the box. And again, I use 2000 all the time, and in supported games, I do increase it to 4K or 8K like Overwatch and Valorant and things like that. But overall, there's nothing else you would want added to this. Maybe angle snapping if I was really stretching, but I don't know of anybody that still use it, and I would just say add it for the sake of it. So yeah, there's that. No complaints, and I guess we can jump into some tests. Since the V3 wired is essentially the V3 Pro wireless, but well better, we use the wireless version for all of our in-game tests. But first we have mouse acceleration and moving the V3 Pro from left to right of our Saturn Pro pad, both slow and fast until it stops tracking, shows that we end up in roughly the same place, taking into account a small amount of human error. This means though there's no acceleration inherent to the implementation of the sensor, and players can then add their own preferred amount in afterwards, which is great. Max tracking speed should be around 19.05 meters per second as well, to which I obviously can't get anywhere near. And I've had no malfunctions on the Saturn Pro, GSR-SE, or the soon-to-launch Mirai Pad either. Button latency is an interesting point to discuss, because on the wired version it will essentially provide 8K polling rate levels of latency at all times, even when you've set it to 1K, whilst on the wireless version it will provide latency that's based on the polling rate set. You can expect Viper 8K levels of latency on the wired version. I've included Piezogo's tech power results for the V3 Pro, but button latency is essentially industry leading and then some, no matter which one you choose. There are also no problems with button debounce time, and I was able to perform the variable jump and shoot mania without issue, where your jump height is directly influenced by how long the button is held down, i.e. I can mini jump without issue because the button is released quick enough. This also means there are no issues with full height rocket jumps in Quake, because both mouse 1 and 2 can be pushed down simultaneously without delay, i.e. you'll always reach maximum height. And finally, as mentioned previously, you can adjust the lift-off distance in Synapse. Now this will depend on your mousepad, so the type of material and colour, but for me on the Black Saturn Pro, when I've set it to low, it will be below 1 DVD. When I've set it to medium, it's again below 1 DVD. And when set to high, I'll have between 1 and 2. Again, you can go in and do the asymmetrical cutoff customization to reduce it even further, and I settled on 4 to 3, again below 1 DVD. So how do they both perform in game? Well, in short, flawlessly. Now I feel I did enough rambling on the differences between the V2 and 3, so assuming the shape is for you, and assuming you're able to adapt to the changes without issue, then there's really no better mice on the market today. They're both industry leading in their respective departments, and the only decision you'll need to ultimately make is between buying either the wired or wireless version. Now for me the decision was, and well still is, easy. Had Bluetooth been present, then I'd certainly have considered maining the wireless V3 Pro, and that's simply for the convenience of having one mouse for both my gaming PC and work laptop. However, since that's not an option, and since the V3 is essentially faster in every department, whilst being lighter, cheaper, and doesn't require charging, why wouldn't I choose the wired? I mean, let's be real, there's absolutely no need nor reason to use a wireless mouse if you can handle a cable. And in this case it's flexible enough, and when combined with a bungee, not at all annoying. I mean, wireless might be as fast as wired mice when you compare competitor A with competitor B, but in this case both mice are from the same company, and one is clearly superior. I continue to see people banging on about motion sync on competitor offerings and how it can add a millisecond of latency, and that is unacceptable. But then those same people would go on to use a wireless mouse which adds the same amount, if not more. Now I'm not here to say this difference is perceivable, but numbers are numbers, and well, numbers don't lie. The simple truth is that if you want the best performing mouse, and if you don't want to think twice, then your only decision here should be the wired V3. The only thing you'll sacrifice at that point is your ability to blame the mouse when you miss, because the only thing holding you back at that point will be you. Or I guess your teammate, weather, or well, the internet. Ultimately though, I can't lie. I did enjoy the freedom of wireless, and my desk looked so much cleaner. So once I hit upload and publish, I'm going straight into the DMs of my Razer contacts until they agree to add back in Bluetooth for the inevitable V4. In the meantime though, I guess that about wraps it up. I hope this isn't the last we see of the original and iconic DeathAdder shape, as I do still think many people out there will continue to prefer it and won't swap to the V3. And if you're on the fence, I'll leave a link to the Ratings 3D shape comparison tool in the description below, so you can compare the shapes yourself before buying. For me at least, the increase in performance and that lowering of the weight was enough to make me jump ship, and since this is technically still called a DeathAdder, I don't really feel like I'm cheating on Bay and swapping. I mean, not all twins look the same, right? But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed my review. I bought both of these mice myself, they weren't sent out for review, and if you yourself have made the V2, then I'd be super interested to hear your thoughts on the V3 in the comment section below. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and stop by my Twitch stream where I broadcast weekly. Now though, take care, keep gaming, and I'll catch you in the next video.
Impressive. Enemy flag taken. Defense. Impressive. Impressive. Excellent. Revenge. Enemy flag taken. Impressive. Excellent. Your team scores.